And although Florida sounds like it's an amazing place to be investing in right now, if it does get to a stage in the real estate cycle where it is becoming very difficult to find that next deal and for it to pencil, you might want to consider a more virtual model and go to a different market.
This episode brought to you by Suites at Madison. Meeting and conference rooms for rent by the hour, week, month, or year. Suites at Madison, where business gets done. Check them out at www.downtowntampaoffice.com. Now, on to the show.
You are listening to the Invest Florida Real Estate Show, covering topics in lending, buy and sell strategies, property management, hot markets, and tips and tools to guide you along the way on your path to real estate success. You want Florida investment real estate talk? You have come to the right place. And now, our hosts, Eric Odum and Steven Silverman.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Invest Florida Real Estate Show. This is your co-host, Eric Odum, flying solo this episode. Steven is up in New York with family. He'll be back for the next episode. But we still have a great guest. We're going to have a great time, even though Steven's not with us, but wanted to take just a moment to thank some of our listeners who left reviews. I want to read one today. We've got a few more of them. We can't read them all today, but I can't tell you how much we appreciate you guys doing this. We will read all of them in one per episode, and thank you each for them. It's so terrific that you do that because, as you know, we work very hard on programming this show, and investors that are potential guests do research on us to make sure that the show is going to be worth their time to come on. And when you guys leave reviews, it helps us achieve that goal of getting great guests. So really appreciate. Want to shout out to 813 Tim on Apple Podcasts. He said, great show. Always have my notepad and pen ready. Can't thank you enough for all of the golden nuggets. 813 Tim, I'm sure you're probably in Tampa. Hopefully we've had a chance to meet you. If not, would like to do so sometime. But appreciate the review. It's much appreciated, and it definitely helps us with programming. We're shifting gears a little bit today because the person that we're interviewing is not in the state of Florida. But I hope that it's going to provide some perspective for you, at least in the state of Florida, where there's really hot markets, of how creative people are handling the market where they might not be able to find deals. And she does virtual wholesaling, and she invests all over the country. She started out in California, and now she's everywhere, and she's and she coaches, and she's got a podcast, and she also is teaching people how to do this. But Lauren Hardy is a real estate investor with a people-first approach to business. Investing in hundreds of properties in her career, Lauren has a unique reputation of being a successful virtual investor, having not lived in many of the states she's investing in. Lauren has been able to persevere in extremely competitive markets by constantly following the market changes and being flexible and willing to move market territories when needed. She currently lives in Southern California with her two daughters, but invests in properties all over the country. Lauren, welcome to the Invest Florida Show.
Hey, Eric, thanks for having me.
No, it's terrific that you're investing some time with us today. Why don't you give us a 30,000-foot view of how and why you got into real estate investing? Then we're going to talk about wholesaling a little later.
Okay, well, how and why? So the why was I did not want to have a job anymore. I got into real estate investing 9 years ago. It was when my first daughter was born. And I learned very quickly that having a young child and working a corporate, 8 to 5 is very, very difficult, especially when both parents do. So I wanted time freedom. And I learned about real estate investing from my brother. So at this time, California, and I live in California. Let me start with that. I live in Orange County, California. And at this time, This was post-recession. There was still a ton of distressed inventory. So it was actually relatively easy to be a house flipper. There was enough seller distress where if you wanted to buy a fixer-upper under market value, if you looked hard enough, you could find one pretty easily. It's not the same, though, anymore. So I got into house flipping. My brother actually started before me, and then he taught me what he knew. He maybe had 3 or 4 flip projects at that time under his belt. So he taught me the skill, the trade. I listened to a lot of podcasts, like Bigger Pockets, and read some books, took some coaching programs, and I learned how to flip houses. When I was in California, so I got started around 2012. At about 2015, the market really, really ramped up, and it started to become more and more difficult to find deals. There was just less seller distress. The foreclosures were drying up. California was hot. This was at just a point of the real estate cycle where, it was starting to become a seller's market. And I noticed that I really had 2 choices. I was either going to have to get a job again to make ends meet, or I need to diversify myself into different markets because there were other areas in the country that just were not in this stage quite yet. And there was still seller distress in these other markets. So I decided to go virtual. And I decided to, figure out how to invest in real estate outside of my backyard. And I've been doing that ever since. So now I wholesale. I wholesale at volume. That's my niche. And I do it in 4 different territories. I've been in, I think, 6 different territories total. But right now I'm in 4. And I also coach. I coach virtual wholesaling and I host a podcast. So I'm involved in a lot of different things.
Well, let's talk a little bit about wholesaling from just a 30,000 foot level, because I know we've covered wholesaling in the past, but for those maybe the first time they're hearing that term, why don't you tell us a little bit about what wholesaling is exactly?
So the word wholesaling is actually a jargon term, and a lot of people don't realize that. And the way I realized that is when I was talking to attorneys and I said, oh, I'm a wholesaler, they didn't know what the heck I was talking about. So the term wholesaling is jargon. For what we do is we are participating in contract assignments. So I do seller marketing, a direct to seller type marketing methods, and I get properties under contract. So I get a purchase contract on a property, and then I'll find an end buyer. Typically, this end buyer is an investor of some sort, usually a house flipper, a landlord buyer, and I will sell my contract to that end buyer via assignment agreement, and I make a fee. So if I get a property under contract for $100,000 and I find a buyer who'd be interested in buying my contract for, say, $120,000, I now make that $20,000 in the middle. And that's my wholesale fee.
Gotcha. So, and part of the reason we are having you on the show today, people are probably wondering, well, she's in California. What does that have to do with Florida? Well, the fact that you do virtual, I think that's what makes it relevant, because we have a lot of investors that say, well, I can't be boots on the ground. I don't, how can I ever participate? Well, this is the method. But the Florida market's a little bit different. You and I talked about this before we got on, because there's some parts of the Florida market that are very similar to California. They're already sort of tapped out.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk to us a little bit about like some of the things that you've learned and kind of what you're thinking about in terms of Florida?
Yeah. So I strongly think that Florida, is on the path to California. Florida has attracted so many institutional investors, and the property values have just skyrocketed. So I definitely think that if you are actively investing in Florida right now, let's say you're a house flipper or you're a wholesaler like me, depending where you are, you're going to feel like I did in California. You probably already feel that way. You're having a harder time finding deals. You're having a harder time getting sellers to take a discount on their home because they know the value of their real estate. Florida's hot. Everybody in Florida knows that. So it might be of interest to look into a more virtual model. And just because I'm virtually wholesaling right now, that doesn't mean that that's the only thing you can do. You can virtually, have rentals. I built homes. My first virtual venture was I was building houses in Nashville. You can flip houses virtually. So you can, invest in apartment buildings virtually. So I think the point that I'm trying to drive home is that you aren't tied to your backyard. And although Florida it sounds like it's an amazing place to be investing in right now, if it does get to a stage in the real estate cycle where it is becoming very difficult to find that next deal and for it to pencil, you might want to consider a more virtual model and go to a different market.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about it. It's, South Florida's a tough market. We're seeing a lot of migration from the South Florida market into the I-4 corridor. But, they hear, there's visions of sugar plum fairies dancing in their head. They come up from Miami that they think there's going to be all sorts of deals in the Tampa area. And that's not necessarily untrue, but there are certain parts of Florida which are in outside of Miami that are also just red hot on fire. Kathy Wood from ARK Investments, we talked about also before the show. She's one of the top sort of angel investors in the country, is moving to St. Pete, and there's parts of St. Pete that are just scalding hot, and now you're going to dump a bunch of 6-figure and 7-figure incomes onto that market, along with the VC groups that are going to be following Kathy. And so, it's going to be, so it's already high, but it's probably going to end up being a lot higher. But I do think that you look at it and you say, well, you're out there in California. It doesn't necessarily mean you've got to be in St. Pete or you've got to be in Miami. There's the Lakeland, there's the I-4 corridor market. There's other markets which still have that ability for investors to be able to buy from outside of the state, inside of the state. So if you're going to attack these markets, Lauren, how do you find that person to assign that contract to?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, right when you were talking, I was thinking of some opportunities in Florida, that, California is gosh, like 30 years probably ahead of. When you were talking about all these little areas in Florida, when a market, I'm sorry, I'm not answering your question you just asked me, but I was like, I want to stop and talk about this. When you've got a market, and I don't know Florida very well, so you might need to help me with the cities, right? Sure. But maybe you've got a market that, the average house price is now getting higher and higher. Say it's, it went from 250,000 and now it's 400,000, and it's, investors just can't find deals there. What do you do next? You want to go kind of right outside of that market. So I coach a lot on that, you don't have to be right in that main metro. Where is an area that's maybe 15 miles outside of that metro? And what happened in California was you would get an area like LA, and then there's an area like San Diego.
Sure.
And they're like 3 hours apart from each other. And those were the big, metros.
Correct.
In California.
Southern Cal, sure.
And Orange County in between it was just this like sleepy agricultural town. But, investors with the foresight said, hey, wait, but you have to drive through Orange County to get to San Diego. There's populations are going to start growing here, and smart investors started buying up property and developing. So I imagine maybe in Florida, there's some opportunity, to be kind of in between these hot zones.
Yeah, it's no different from California. Right now, it depends on who you listen to. So I'm sure there'd be folks that would contest that based on different data points. But the I-4 corridor, which roughly runs, we like to say the I-4 triangle, which is Tampa, Orlando, Jacksonville, is the hottest market in the country, bar none. It's just on fire. In the center part of the state, you have it's called the Villages. And it's the fastest growing area in the country. And so you have these areas, but you talk about going to Orange County. For us, that's Plant City. That's Lakeland. That's in between on that I-4 corridor between Orlando, between, Disney, between Mickey Mouse and Tampa.
Yeah.
And it's that area that's in between. So it's all that growth. But also you've got in the northwest or northeast corner of the state's Jacksonville. And that's also, kabooming and all that area that's sort of in between. So we like to call it the I-4 triangle. It's really more of a triangle than it is a corridor, but it is hotter than a pistol. But it's the areas in between. Just like it is just like in Orange County and you're talking about.
Well, the area, because the areas in between, the prices, you haven't hit that absorption where, the population has bought up all the homes. Now the prices have to go up. So there might still be, deals there in that area in between. If it was me, and I just kind of geek out on this stuff. I love looking into markets and economies. What I would do is I would look, in that map. It sounds like you kind of have these cities in your head, and I would go and actually contact the local, economic development department of those cities to see what are they doing to attract more professional jobs to those cities. And you might find that there are, a couple of those cities that are offering great tax, incentives or some kind of incentive for companies to move there. And if you find that out, you're kind of ahead of the game. You got to think if there are some employers that are moving to these smaller cities, for one, they say for every one professional job, there's a multiplier effect and it creates 4 service jobs. Yep. So I could see Florida just being a gold mine, for that type of activity. So if I was local to Florida, I would be looking for the smaller emerging markets.
So let's focus on the smaller emerging markets. It doesn't have to be Florida. It could be anywhere. How are you finding those assignees for your deals? How would you try to lay the groundwork for that?
Yeah. So I love what I do is there's so much software out there. I use a software called PropStream. And I will buy a list off of them, and I look for absentee owners, which is basically that their property address is different from the tax billing address. So that's an indication it's some type of investor or it was a second home. I like to buy those lists and see who's buying in the area. And I will make contact with those buyers. A lot of them are hedge funds. I love areas where there's hedge fund activity because that's just, they're the best buyers. They pay the most. So that's one really easy way, and it's available to anyone.
Yeah, and those hedge funds, correct me if I'm wrong, but you look at who owns them and it's like, AAA Resources LLC number 4.
Yeah. It'll always be like that, like SLP3, or something weird. It's always some very kind of weird name with a number in it. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. But you can Google it and figure out what you should just do is grab their address, the mailing address, and then usually that'll get you to the name of the actual hedge fund.
And so swimming in that ocean, you find the hedge funds. How do you find the actual acquisition person? I mean, because sometimes you're calling these firms that have 200 or 300 employees and they don't know who does what. And so how do you navigate that?
You do actually have to just call and say who's in charge of acquisitions in this territory.
And hopefully you get directed to the right person.
Yeah. And if you don't, you just kind of keep calling, to get, eventually you'll get to the right person. But it can be challenging.
Yeah, I'm sure. So you're operating out of California and you're moving into another market, and you say you like to geek out on finding new markets. What are some of your bogeys that you look for that you think there's enough of a delta between what you can buy for and what you can sell for to make it worth your while to move into that market? So
what I'm looking for is, I'm trying to figure out how, what the best way to describe this. It depends what you want to do. So first thing is, what is your exit strategy? Are you wanting to buy single family rentals? Are you looking to syndicate apartment deals? Are you a house flipper, or do you just want to be a wholesaler? So let's use the example of I just want to wholesale houses. The first thing that I would do is I want to look for the proof of concept, meaning I want to know that there's other people wholesaling houses in that area. It's very gut feeling, and it sounds too easy, right? But that is important, that there are other people actively doing what you're trying to do.
Sure.
There, you need to see a little bit of that activity there. Otherwise, there's an indication, why is nobody doing this? If you're the only one doing it, there's probably something wrong.
Right, sure.
So if you're looking to be a wholesaler, the other things I would look for, what I found in my experience is that the best markets to wholesale are actually markets that are still kind of going through some economic distress. Because then there's enough seller distress. You need motivated sellers that are willing to sell their house at a discount to be a wholesaler. So there's got to be this balance of there's still some economic distress balanced with that they're also those still buyers buying. It's like a perfect, I want to give you a couple different, can I give you some examples?
Of course, yeah. So you just have to be in Florida. I mean, let's talk about some stuff you're doing outside of Florida.
Yeah. So Florida. Okay. So I've got 350 students. So I've had some in Florida, and I'll give you some of what I've heard. Right. So my students that chose Florida, the problem that they faced is that sellers know that Florida's hot, and there's, Florida is in that stage of the cycle, where, it's a seller's market. So when they're talking to sellers, trying to, get them to agree to taking, 20, 30% off their home, the sellers are telling them to go pound sand.
Sure.
So they have to talk to more sellers, and really spin their wheels, right, to get that one great deal, and even then they have a lot of competition. So in my opinion, if it was me and I'm going virtual, as a wholesaler, I'm not choosing Florida. There's other easier markets to work. Now, if you're a developer, I think Florida is an amazing market. If you're
Sure.
a developer, if you want to get into other stuff, fine. But if you're a wholesaler and you're just looking to put properties under contract, under market value, and sell them to, end buyers, Florida wouldn't be my first place, because it's just too on the map right now. It's too hot.
Sure.
But move over to let's just say Oklahoma City. That's one of the markets I'm in. It's very balanced. Oklahoma City, I wouldn't say it has gone through any kind of development boom, or it's on the map right now as this hot market that everybody's moving to. But it's stable. It's got a stable economy. There's good job diversity there. In the last recession, they actually didn't get hit that hard, but property values don't also go up very high. It's just kind of your middle ground Midwestern market. I prefer Oklahoma City. There's still a good amount of seller distress, but there's a ton of activity with end buyers. Hedge funds are all over Oklahoma City right now because it's a great rental market. It's really great for that single family rental. It's getting, whatever the return model is, the hedge funds are loving Oklahoma City and Tulsa. So I like markets like that. But then, Oklahoma City got really popular within the wholesaler community, and it's very saturated with wholesalers, unfortunately for me. So I ventured into another market that was a little different. The market is Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And Pittsburgh, if you know anything about Pittsburgh, the unemployment rate is actually going up in Pittsburgh, and people are moving out. The population growth is declining. They've had some economic struggles over the years, and I wanted to try Pittsburgh out for that reason, because I thought, well, then there's probably a good amount of seller distress, and sellers will probably, I could probably do some good deals there as a wholesaler. I'm not buying these homes anyway for long-term hold anyway. And I noticed after I did the research, there are hedge funds in Pittsburgh. There's funds buying in Pittsburgh because they're able to cash flow. So I chose, that market, and I found that was one of my easier markets to do business in, because
Wow.
There's still a lot of seller distress. And for some reason, there's not a lot of wholesalers. It hadn't attracted a lot of wholesalers, probably because of the negativity, of its economic conditions. But it's actually been a great market for me. So sorry, that's a long-winded one.
No, but that's good, because it kind of shines some light on the markets that are going to work better than others. And, you're right. Florida's for wholesaling is tough. I mean, right now we've got we have all the institutional guys in here, the long-term hold guys, buying, bidding up pricing, cap rate compression, and all that sort of thing, because their philosophy on it is that it's just going to continue to get more and more escalated, the pricing and the rents, and therefore they're just going to ride that. They're going to be holding it for 20 years, and they're just going to, ride that cash flow, increasing cash flow they think they're going to be able to get. So that's still hot, and development's still hot here. But certainly, I've heard the same stories from the wholesalers that you have to move out of the major markets. You have to go into these areas that, in Florida has distressed areas too. Maybe not like, I want to say parts of Alabama or Mississippi distressed, but there's still areas here, particularly in the Panhandle, the more remote areas, that are going to look more like places in Alabama than they are St. Pete and Orlando and Miami, which are just nuclear reactor hot.
Right. And that's where you need to go. If you're a wholesaler, and you're working Florida and maybe you're in Tampa and it's too much, it's too competitive, you haven't gotten a deal in a long time, like where's the next city over or the next county over that's, not quite as hot?
Lauren, I know that you have a number of ways that you've got your toe in the market and trying to help get deals and whatnot, from your podcast to your coaching and whatnot. If folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to go ahead and do that?
I will give you two ways. So I'm pretty active on Instagram. So you can find me at This Mom Flips on Instagram. And then I have a website with some free stuff. If you're interested in freebie or free giveaway stuff, I've got a good website to go to. Go to laurenhardyco.com.
Awesome. Lauren, any other words of wisdom you have for our listeners before we let you go today?
Oh man, words of wisdom. Well, I would say, since it's, I'm talking to a Florida audience, just look at California. Do some research on the history of California, because I feel like, Florida, I think you said is 20 years or 30 years behind us?
Probably, yeah. 20 years, probably. Yeah,
that came from you. And I believe it, so maybe look into what some of the revolutionary developers did in California to give you ideas of the possibilities in Florida. I think Florida's growth is not going to stop. I think Florida has an amazing outlook and great potential. So get some ideas from California developers. One to look into might be like the Irvine Company, looking up Donald Bren. So he kind of banked on the Orange County being in the middle of the two major metros. So get some ideas and get inspired by California.
Awesome. Lauren, really appreciate the time that you invested with us today. And your podcast, did you give it to us?
Oh, it's Wholesaling Inc. Yes. So check out Wholesaling Inc. It's a podcast all about wholesaling if you are interested. And I also have a virtual wholesaling coaching program that you can find on my website as well.
Awesome. Lauren, really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
And that was Lauren Hardy talking virtual wholesaling. We wanted to have Lauren on the show because there's a lot of market. There are a lot of markets in Florida that are hotter than a pistol, and investors, wholesalers specifically, are struggling to find deals. And so Lauren talks about how to do that outside of your market, how to try to target that market and find the assignees that you might be able to get a deal done with, but how to reach outside of your comfort zone. And let's say South Florida might be too hot or the Tampa area might be too hot to be able to find those wholesale deals. You can reach into other markets. It doesn't necessarily have to be Florida. You can go outside of Florida. And transversely, folks that are in New York or Michigan that want to try to participate in the Florida market, they can certainly come in here and look, doing virtual wholesale deals. It's certainly an option you might want to look at, and it kind of gives you that opportunity to dip your toe in the sand without necessarily having to be here for it. Guys, as always, we appreciate the time that you invest with us each and every episode. If you want to listen to other great guests just like Lauren, go to www.investfloridashow.com. Until next time, hasta la vista.
You've just listened to the Invest Florida podcast with Eric Odum and Steven Silverman. Join us every week for actionable real estate investment ideas, and of course, visit our website at www.investfloridashow.com for more shows and tips on how to earn a cash flow in the real estate market in Florida. While hosts and producers of the Invest Florida show have no reason to doubt the validity of comments of our guests, we do not warranty their accuracy. Please check with your legal, financial, and tax advisors before entering into any investment. Returns will vary from person to person and deal to deal based on unique circumstances. All information expressed in this show is for educational purposes only. Opinions of the guests are not necessarily shared by the hosts and producers of the Invest Florida show.